Hello, my name is Tina Ford. I'm the founder of the Moms Group in Clareton, PA. And thank you for tuning in today with Broken But Not Destroyed. Today I am speaking with Miss Beverly Warfield. She is one of the members of our group, and she is also the treasurer of our group. And beside her is Jean Gresham Jacobs. And today we'll be talking about George Maxwell. That was her son. And she's going to give us a little background about George.
George. Actually, my mother was, it actually starts with my mother. Mother was a foster parent. And George was her last child. And he came to us when he was 9 months old. And it was fine. We was fine. I was like sort of the second mom. I was like a sort of a sister mom to him. And then when he got to be 4, he was on that show, Adopt a Child, and someone saw him and decided they wanted to adopt him. And I said, maybe that can't happen. And so I am at 4 years old. I adopted George. And they say, you don't have to birth a child to love a child.
Right.
Because George was my child. And I loved him like I birthed him. And, growing up, he was a sweet child. He did some things, as all children do. And, we went through and we sort of grew up together, and I had to move out of my mother's house because we both wouldn't raise him because we would all been crazy. Yeah, but George was something. He was a child that he would get mad, and then 2 seconds later he was fine, and they was loving and kissing on you. He had a quick temper, but it didn't last long, and he was always giving advice. He didn't always follow the advice, but he was always giving advice.
Right.
He was one of those children that he can tell you what to do. He didn't necessarily do it himself, but he can tell you what to do. He can tell you right from wrong. But he didn't always do right. He didn't always do the right thing.
Right.
But and he was a lovable child. He people just drew to him. Just like Jean. Her son. They was like this. He was just that type of person. And I don't know what I mean. People out in the street would say how mannerable he was, and and I say, talking about, cause,
Right.
They had those two sides. They had that side outside, and they had that side inside, and they don't always be the same side.
Right.
Yeah, but he basically he was a good kid. He was a decent man. I'm just sad that I didn't really get to see what type of man he would actually become, because he was so young when he got killed. He was only 21 when he was killed. And the day he was killed, he was walking down the street going towards my house. 'Cause, he wasn't, he's 21, thinking he grown and don't want to listen, don't have to listen, and so he was out there doing whatever. But he was walking down the street, and I was coming from the grocery store, and I happened to come past him, and picked him up. He came, brought my groceries in the house, and we talked a little bit. And he was saying how he had found him a job at McDonald's. He was going to start on Monday, and that was the last I saw of him.
Now, I had the same situation too, whenever a week before with Armani, how he was like, "Mom, I want to start my own cleaning business." And so you think at that moment, like, okay, they're changing, they're growing. You know what I mean? But it would have been nice to see them fulfill these dreams, like driving through the drive-through, seeing George. Hey, George, give me some extra fries, or I'm going to tell your mom on you. You know what I mean? Just stuff like that. Just see the progress that they are making.
Right.
Different things, but their life was cut short.
Right.
Right. What about you, Jean? How was your experience with George?
Um, well, being my younger starting off as like my uncle, because it was my grandmother who was his foster mother, starting off as kind of like my uncle, even though I was 10 years older than he was.
Right.
You know, I changed his diaper, you know,
Right,
and
but he your uncle.
babysat him, but he my uncle. But then when my aunt, you know, when it switched and he became my cousin, it didn't change the relationship. And he was the funniest. He was the funniest little kid, and always kept you in stitches. I remember his one thing. He always sucked his thumb, and it drove both his mama and his grandmother nuts. I mean, every time, no matter what, he sucked his thumb. One time they put a Band-Aid on it, but he had sucked his thumb so much that when the Band-Aid came off, the skin on the top of his thumb came off too, because that's how much he had sucked his thumb. But it got corrected, you know, but it never, he had jokes about it. I mean, because he remembered it happening and everything, and watching him as he grew up, because he became, as I was his babysitter, he became my oldest son's babysitter also. So the cycle, you know, continued. But he always you could always in some way get a smile out of him, and he could always get a smile out of you. You know, he was a loving, very loving person, and very, like she said, you know, there's some choices we make, and there's some choices, you know, he made, you know, and what I loved, but he was kind of like another little brother to me. I have a younger brother, but he was another little brother to me, and it was a blessing to be able to get to know him in the time that I did, and to be as close to him as I was. There was summers I'd stay at her house and babysat him, you know, dropped him off at the Y and made sure I picked him back up from the Y, and we'd walk up this long hill, and he'd be telling me the whole time up the hill every single thing that happened at the Y, and I mean he didn't miss not a blade of grass that got stepped on or anything, but he would say everything that happened at the Y that day. And he just was so, from being more like a little brother to being also a friend, and being someone who, even though he was younger than I was, he looked out for me, and I looked out for him, and he was, you know, just a cool kid. Got on my nerves sometimes,
right?
You know, but that was
Because they will.
Because that's what they do.
Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah. Definitely. So, being that this tragedy happened to you as well as me, you know, I've been through it too or whatever. So can you say that it changed your life?
Well, it changed my life because eventually I ended up adopting his two children. He had two children also, and they were not in a good place with their mother. And it wasn't my intention to adopt them, but they said they wasn't in a good place, and ended up, my husband and I ended up adopting them also. But he changed my life because, like I said, with my mother being a foster parent, she actually started taking children in when I was 10 years old. And I always said that I wasn't having any children. You know, then there's that thing that say, you know, you want to make God laugh, make a plan. Well, he's been laughing at me for a long time. Because I'm always making plans.
Right. We
said,
all
no.
do.
He said, no, that's not how that's going to work. This is how this is going to work.
Right.
You know? Yeah, but it did change me. And I know that, like I said, you went through it, the same thing I went through, but we go through it differently. And where you're at now is different from where I'm at, because it's been 20 years.
Right.
November 5th was 20 years for me. And you never forget.
Right.
I mean, you never forget. It's just you change. I'm not still in that grieving process. I'm in the recovery process. But it's different. I mean, now I can talk about him without boo-hoo crying sometimes.
Right.
There's still times when I do talk about him and I will break down. I guess it depends on where I happen to be at that particular time.
Right.
But like I said, but he was, like I said, and I miss him. I miss him every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wish that he could be here to see his children,
Mm-hmm.
to see what kind of people they are. And I even think that maybe the lifestyle that they're living would even be different if he was still here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a domino effect when you take someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
It does not just affect that one person.
Right.
It affects the whole family, and not just his family. It affects the person that did the killing. It affects their family also. It's
Right.
not when someone takes someone else's life. It's not just between them two.
Mm-hmm.
His whole families are torn apart because
They are.
of one senseless act.
Yep, the selfish. Murder is very selfish.
And the sad part of it is the person that shot my child didn't even know my child. He was taking up for somebody else, and that's the type of person he was. Mm-hmm. He would take up for you, even if he didn't know you. If he saw someone doing something to you and it wasn't right, he would take up for you. That's the type of person that he was. So to get shot or for something like that because he was taking up for someone else, and because this person didn't like it,
Mm-hmm.
why? What's the point?
Right.
You know, and I really would like the one guy that was not the shooter, but he did go to jail. He's out now, and I really would like to ask him why.
Mm-hmm.
Why did this have to happen like this? You know, what gives you the right to take someone's life? You know, you do not have that right to do that. You know, and they said that's not just affect two people, or in this case, 3 people. It affects families.
Does.
And it's going down the line. It affects his children because his children had to grow up without a father.
Mm-hmm. Not by choice.
Not by choice. Not by choice. And they were 1 and 2 years old when he was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So Deja, she knows him. She remembers him because she was with him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Shay, unfortunately, don't remember him as much because she was only a year old.
Mm-hmm.
She had just turned a year old. Her birthday was October 30th. He was killed November 5th.
Wow.
So he left these 2 babies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they grew up, and then, you know, I mean, they had my husband, but he was older, and it's the difference. It's the difference when, you know, not to say that he didn't love them and he didn't take care of them and he didn't nourish them the way that they needed to. But when it's a grandfather thing, and that took away us being grandparents because we had to be parents to these children, and they had parents. We shouldn't have to be their parents. And unfortunately, that's the way life is. You know, unfortunately, that's what happens. You know, they took away his parent. They took away their parent, and they made us their parent.
Right.
I missed out on being a grandmother because
right.
I had to be a parent, and it's different. It really is different. You know, and so it changed my life.
It does.
It does. It did change my life. You know, it's like and you go through and different stages of. And I know that first Christmas after he passed. I mean, I like really overcompensated.
She did.
I tried to buy out the
she bought everything.
store.
Everything.
I tried
Everything.
to buy this because he wasn't here. He wasn't here to give to his children. So it's like, okay, then this is what I got to do. You know, and it's like, but that didn't last long. I mean, I only did it the 1 year.
Right.
But it makes you do things that you don't normally do. You know, and I remember one time I was in the store, and it was like this sadness came over me, and it's just like I couldn't understand why I was so sad. Well, here it was the day before his birthday, and it dawned on me what was going on with me, and it's like, and so I had to leave the store.
Right.
I couldn't even finish doing what I was doing. I couldn't even remember why I was even in the store.
Right.
You know, but I've gotten beyond that. And I don't always feel that now. I don't always do that now. But there are times I'll be home and I'll be, sitting around and I'll think of something and I'll just start crying.
Right.
It's not as much as it used to be. I'm getting better as the years go on, but it's not something that you ever forget.
And then you say you're getting better, but you just had a 20-year anniversary.
Right.
Whereas I'm just going into 2 years.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I remember saying I started the group so I know the process that I would have to go through. I didn't want to go in blindfolded,
Right.
So now going into 2 years, I'm still going to be where I'm at now in 20 years or 30 years.
You may. It may change. I can't say how you're going to go through because everyone goes through differently. Everyone responds differently. Everyone doesn't react the same way. Everyone has to go through their own way. So when people tell you to get over, it's time to get over it, that's a crock.
Yeah.
They cannot tell you it's time to get over. You don't get over something like that. You change, but you don't get over it.
Right.
And that's even like, even with Gene, they say they had a love-hate relationship. They loved each other, and then there were times when they hated each other, and it was like you just look at them, it's like, but could no one mess with her? Right. And he knew about it. That it'd be on. And same thing with her. If someone messed with him, it'd be on. And so and like I said, it affect her just like it affect me. And just like some other women were saying that they got to see their son, when he got killed, but I never got that. I never had that. I didn't see him until the funeral.
Yeah, me too. I didn't get to see.
I didn't get to see him. And when they had the trial, I actually had to leave because they showed pictures of him being shot and where he got shot at, and it was like I couldn't even look at it. It was it just hurt my heart, that someone actually would do that to another human being, not just because he was my son, but just because he was a human being. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you do stuff like that? What is the point of, and
that's what we need to, I started this for awareness to let people know what we go through because a lot of times people don't understand if it doesn't affect you personally. Once the funeral, everything, they go home and that's when we start our grieving. But I do enjoy, unfortunately, that I have to interview people who lost their loved ones to gun violence. But it's definitely time to start sitting down and talking to people who actually pulled the trigger. You know what I mean? We have our stories, but what's their motive? You know what I mean? Make them accountable of what they did, because it's people who watching the podcast here or people who know or is going through it. But it's not a mom who has their son who is in jail for murder, or their son is still in the streets because they live by the street code. And how do you feel knowing that your child did this? If you feel, hey, my child is innocent, he didn't do this, okay. But where's the mom who's like, listen, I raised my child right in the church at 18. He became a man. He did this, you know what I mean? Because moms who are taking the responsibility, knowing that their kid did stuff like this, they're taking that grief. They're taking that burden. They're dealing with it. And it's time to start interviewing a little bit of everybody, because everybody's a piece of the puzzle. It's not just us.
Right.
We have to make everybody accountable for it, and we have to start confronting people. Like you want to ask the gentleman who killed your son, hey, I wouldn't mind having that moment to do it, or sit down with the mom. Listen, I don't blame you, but I want you to know that, hey, I know you're going through what I'm going through. It's not like, you can sleep, because, you think when this happens, oh, they can still sleep. They're going about their business, but that's not really true. They still walking with their head down as well.
Because it's like as soon as I don't know if you've ever thrown a stone into a water or even a small pebble into water, and there's all these ripples that happen.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
As soon as the bullet leaves the chamber, all these ripples start to happen.
Right.
It ripples back to the person who did it. It ripples to the person who's the victim. It ripples to the parents. It ripples to the grandparents. It ripples to the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, the children. There's a ripple effect. As soon as that bullet leaves the chamber, the ripple begins. As soon as it leaves, and that ripple touches everybody differently. You know, like she said, as the mom, you know, there's that, my child is no longer here.
Right.
You know, as the family member, my family member who I talk to almost every day, you know, who would just stop by the house on a whim, you know, is no longer here. The children, my parents is no longer here, or even, and that's on both sides, you know, even the one on the side of the one who did, you know, who did the deed, you know, the one who did the killing.
Yes.
You know, there's a ripple effect to them also, especially when they have to go to jail, because guess what? So now you're no longer with your family either. And now your family is, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your whoever is in your family is affected. And you can't, we can no longer take lightly anymore these little aggressions, you know, that seem to be happening amongst our children. We can't take it lightly because they're no longer doing how we used to do back in the day, where I meet you outside 3 o'clock, put you do stuff, slap on your Vaseline, put on your sneakers, take your earrings out, let's go at it. They're not doing that anymore. That's not their first thought anymore. Their first thought is I'm gonna get you before you get me.
Right. Nobody wants to take that loss, that L.
Right.
Yes.
You know, whereas and unfortunately too many, and I'm not saying everyone, but unfortunately too many don't realize that you can't make a permanent decision off of a temporary emotion.
Right.
Because that temporary emotion will have such a long lasting effect. And before you know it, you've done something out of an anger or a mood. And now you've got to come back to self. Once you come down off that anger, now you've come back to self. Now what?
Now you regret it.
Now you
got regrets and different things. Yeah.
And, you know, and all these people walking around, you know, carrying guns, saying, I need a gun for protection. I need a gun for this. I need a gun so that I can do this before someone does it to me. But, you know, once you get that gun and it's like, and you pull that trigger and then you say, oops, it's too late. Oops, it's too late.
It is. It's definitely. We talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Because I remember Armani used to always be like, Mom, go get your license. Go get your license. And I was like, no, I don't live like that. But he was like, but life now makes you live like that. And I kept saying, no. And I'm glad I didn't, because where I was at in the beginning, that could have went real bad. You took my son, I can take your cousin, your mom, your dad, get your grandma. She's an easy target. Because you think like this, like, you took my son from me, I'm going to take someone from you. And I could be okay and do that time. But like you said, once the smoke clear, I have a whole daughter that needs me. You know, I can't be selfish.
Right.
You know,
the anger will cloud.
Yes,
anger
and
will cloud your judgment.
And
anger will completely. Actually, I mean that, and especially blind rage. Blind rage is just what it is. It's blind, and it's a rage. It's blind.
It is.
It doesn't see before right this moment, right this second, right here, right now. This is all I see right here, right now. I can't think about the consequences. I can't think about anything else but what I want, how I want it right now. And this blind rage that I have right now is telling me that I need to do this. Damn the consequences. Until, like you said, the smoke clears. And then the consequences set in.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what has happened?
There you go. Oops.
Yeah. Oops.
What has happened?
Oops don't work.
It don't. But I know I have to be out here and, you know, stand with the women who's been through what I've been through, and we do our marches and our protests and go to our state representative, Austin Davis. We love him to death. He supports the mom group to no end, you know, but, you know, I need to be out here fighting for our children. I always focus on legacy. You know, I said all the time, legacy for our kids. If you don't know our kids, you will. You will learn and know everything about our children, you know. But, you know, unfortunately, I spoke to 2 women this week who lost their child. I mean, when is it going to stop? You know, 2 women. You know, and I'm talking to them and I'm bringing them joy and trying to, you know, make them laugh just a little bit out of, you know, what they're going through. But it's hard.
It is hard.
You know, and it's hard because just playing back in my mind when I heard the pastor Calloway, love pastor, you know, Calloway, and he said that we should not be burying our children.
Right.
And that 13 being at a funeral, who would have thought that would be my reality? I would have never, if you would have told me that this would have been my reality, I would have been like, nah. I probably would put all the money up. Like, I will bet you, like, this won't happen. But I mean, you know, look where we are today.
Because no one can truly say, because you don't know what the next person is going to do. And that's why we have to each be intentional about how we're treating one another. You know, just simply saying hi to someone could possibly change their whole mood. Yes. You know, or simply, you know, say, you know, just acknowledging that they're there, because that's a part of the problem is that too many of our young people are feeling like they're not being acknowledged, they're not being heard, they're not being respected. There's this big thing about respect. They're not being respected. I'm not you. They're not giving me my respect. They're not giving me my due. So
I'm gonna take it.
Dude, what you do?
Yeah.
I mean, you do. They're not giving me my due. Okay, that's fine, and that's all well and good. And unfortunately, too many are coming from backgrounds where they're not necessarily encouraged to seek other options other than violence to answer their questions, or violence to take care of a confrontation. You know, confrontation doesn't have to be bad.
No, it don't.
And it doesn't have to end in death. And that's something that we've really got to start instilling in the next generation, that instills in the next generation and the next into the, you know, as a trickle down effect. We have to instill that confrontation does not have to be about, I need to take you out before you take me out.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a matter of a misunderstanding and a sentence that needs to be said to squash where all this high energy and all this rage is coming from in the first place. Sometimes it's just a matter of having a conversation. Communication is key, but understanding is much, much more needed. I can communicate with you all day, but if you don't understand what I'm saying, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So there has to be communication along with understanding.
And also, and to piggyback on what you just said, you know, I can just say for my grandchildren, you know, I know they have a lot of issues, and I know that they're angry about things, but they don't understand what they're angry about. But they don't want to talk to anyone. They say, no one understands what I'm going through. Well, you're right. No one understands unless you tell them. If you don't tell someone what you're going through or how you're feeling, they're not going to understand. And you have to get rid of this anger that you're carrying around. But until you understand the anger itself, and that's the thing, we as our young black people, period. I'm not going to even just say black people. I'm just saying young people, period. They walk around thinking that the world owes them something because you're here. No, the world does not owe you anything. You know, but you know, everyone needs to live here together, and we need to do that as people, as God's people. We are all God's children, good, bad, or indifferent. We are all His children, and we need to act like it. We need to respect each other as being God's children. You know, and somebody, you got a problem, okay. Can we talk about it? You know, well, if you want to talk now, you know, maybe you want to come back later and talk about it. But to just carry around all this anger is not good for you or anyone else. You know, you got to release it, but try not just going out and killing somebody to release your anger. It has to be another way.
And then we even as the older generation, the parents, the grandparents, or whatever, we also need to be mindful and patient, because not everyone has had that same upbringing. Not everyone has had that same has been made to come to that same understanding.
Right.
Too many are coming from, let me fight first and then I'll deal with whatever later.
Right.
You know, as opposed to saying, wait, let me take a step back, let me take a breath. And, you know, and then of course as teens, and we a little far removed from being teens. We ain't that far that we don't remember.
But we
remember, you know.
Remember.
But in being teens, you do things, you know, like that, you know, or even in our 20s, you know, we do things that we don't maybe quite all the way think all the way through.
Right.
You know, and never for the grace of God, some of us lived through some crazy stuff,
Right.
You know, some maddening things. But we have to be mindful and respectful of the fact that not all of the next generation is aware of, you know, how to actually deal with, you know, or to even speak out loud to say, I have a problem.
Right.
Because our community has a stigmatism when it comes to seeking help, seeking therapy, saying I have a problem, or I'm angry and I don't know why, and I don't know how to express it. In our community, we've been told too many times, well, what happens in our house stays in our house.
Yes.
Right. Tell nobody else nothing.
Right.
So we've got too many folks walking around my age, you know, your age, who've got all this stuff bent up. So now it has trickled down to the next generation.
Right.
You know, where now they're like, well, I'm the only one going through this. Meanwhile, what they don't know is the person they're sitting right next to, because they haven't said anything.
Yes.
They're going through it too.
Same thing.
Yeah, because I talked to
thing.
a couple of my friends, you know, 3 of my friends, and they all go see a therapist. I was like, well, this is a conversation about all of us having a therapist. You know what I mean? And when it first happened with Armani, I had 2 therapists. I was like, I need somebody in my ear and in my face all the time, because, and then it's not a bad thing. It's just somebody who is outside looking in.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they could really be honest. You know, when you talk to them, they're giving you an honest opinion instead of just trying to coach you because they know you.
Right.
And then even growing up, like all my friends I had both parents in the home. Both parents worked. We did family vacations.
Right.
So it was like left to my left, I had it to my right. So as you start going to school, and I went to Catholic schools, to start going to the public schools and knowing like, oh, single parent homes, okay, but not being like, oh, well, do you do this or do you have this? No, I just have my mom, or I'm just living with my dad, and I'm just real naive, like, oh, but you can still do it or get it, or you know what I mean?
Right,
because that wasn't my norm,
right?
You know, or whatever. But yeah, we need the village. We need to bring that back.
Right.
That village,
you know what I mean?
has to come back.
You know what I mean? Because if I see the little girls in the store the one day and they want, oh, I want that one, I'm like, well, here, I'll give you $5 and y'all split and get it. You know what I mean? Because that's what people did to us.
Right. Yep.
You know, and helped us out. And then, you know, if you cussing, hey, watch your mouth. You know, sorry, ma'am. And it's like, you're not my mother.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm not saying nothing.
Right.
That sounds like a grown folk fight in the parking lot. So I'm not saying nothing.
And that's the thing, you know, that's the thing. You're afraid. You're actually, sometimes you're afraid to say something to someone else's child because you don't know the reaction that you're going to get.
Right.
You know, and this, like you said, when we were growing up, you know, if you said a swear word, you look behind you, make sure you know. So Miss So and So wasn't standing over your shoulder.
A swear word for wearing lip gloss or lipstick, you wasn't allowed. You wasn't allowed red lipstick. You wasn't allowed red polish. You know, stuff like that. So you knew certain things. Like if you seen somebody, you was like, she's going to tell. You better watch.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we don't have that anymore. You know, like you said, you're afraid to even say something to someone else's child because, you know, and then sometimes I hear young people talking. You know, and it's like, well, who are they talking to? And it be their mother. Who does that? You know, and so we're in the respect. I think that's the thing. I think people have lost respect for themselves and each other. When you don't respect yourself, you cannot respect anyone else.
You're right.
And that's why we have this, you know, hey, he said something to me that I ain't like. Bang, I'm gonna shoot you.
Right.
Because they don't the respect is gone.
Right. Because it has to be it has to start with a self-respect. If I respect myself enough, if I respect myself enough in this world to know that I have a right to be here, then I'll respect the next person's right to be here.
Right.
So, but when I don't have my own respect, when I feel like I'm not respected and I'm not heard, and and it's me against the world, you know. And also I can't be weak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't be weak. I can't have it look like somebody punked me or anything. So I can't allow that to happen either.
Right.
So let me go handle my business. Let me go grab my gun and do what I need to do.
Right.
You know, whereas we have to learn and we have to come to an understanding that it's okay to be weak. Because in your weakest moments is when you grow the most. Because that's where you find out where your true strength is, in your weakest moments. And it's not about being punked or disrespected. It's just about gaining more insight into who you are.
And it's funny you said it, because I think that was what happened with George, because he said he was taking up with someone else. And so this person that he was taken up for actually had left the scene. And so it was just him and this other person. And so this person was thinking, well, he gone, I might as well take it out on him. You know, and that's the thing. And they said there was a shooter, and then there was someone that was fighting. I mean, they were fighting first, from what I understand. I wasn't there, so I don't know the whole story. But, you know, they beat him up. They pistol whipped him, and then they shot him. You know, and it's like, okay, well, once you had him on the ground and you pistol, what was the point of shooting him too? But again, like you say, they didn't want to feel punked,
disrespected.
Yeah.
You stepped on my sneakers.
You can't talk to me like that. Who you think you are?
Right.
You know, and there's that again that thing with everybody walking around with this gun. If you didn't have they didn't have the gun, the fight could have been done done with. Everybody go home.
Because I know that's how it was with Armani when somebody tried to, you know, get in the vehicle with him, and you know they was tussling or whatever, and then he ran. The guy got out and ran, and he got out and chased him. Because the detective was like, "Oh, your son was tough. Like he got out and chased him, you know." And I was like, "Ooh, okay. You know, like, ooh, okay, but ooh, you know what I mean?" Because if he for that moment just would have been like, "Okay, I'm gonna just drive off," but you know, it's a man thing, because you know we'll never know, because we women, you know, us we'll cry or, you know, call you up or
actually,
say.
I'm gonna disagree with that for a little bit, because nowadays, even the
girls
women
are even worse now.
The women nowadays are they are also they have that, you know, you're not gonna disrespect me attitude, you know, and they be out there fighting and tussling like they're men.
Yeah,
you know,
I heard that too.
Unfortunately, it's like the way of the world. Why? When do we get to? It's like we're going back to caveman days. You know, and we should be evolving this way, and not we're going backwards.
So I thank you, ladies, for being here today. We had a good conversation. I wish we could talk longer, but I would like to thank our sponsors: The Village Inn, Love Son, D.I.D. Associates, Slater Funeral Home, Senator Jim Brewster, State Representative Austin Davis, and Jeffrey Carter. I Got the Hookup Incorporated. And thank you for tuning in. You have a great rest of your day.